Hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome to our next Getting to Know the Speaker interview today. We are just a few, like 11 days out from the event. I'm getting pretty excited. I hope you are too. It's nice to see new people signing up every day. Can't wait to see you all June 11th at Embassy Suites in South Jordan. Today, I'm joined by Adam Boswell. Adam, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks. How are you?
Awesome. Awesome. Good to have you here. So why don't we jump right in? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you ended up in software and, sort of a little bit about you.
Sure. So, we'll start way back. When I was 6 years old, my mother brought me home a nice, shiny 386, not the one with the turbo button on it. That was later in life. But she brought me that home, and my first program was written at age of 7.5, and I was like, this is amazing. This is the greatest thing I ever wanted to do. And I literally never deviated from that. So I have come up through software engineering into DBA and different things like that until I decided in 2009 to start my own software company. I successfully exited from that in 2014 and lived a pretty fun life for a couple of years, and then failed utterly at trying to start another one where I blew all the money that I made from the first one. And after some pity party and getting over myself, I ended up as a director of architecture at Western Governors University, where I've been at for the last 2 years, trying to help with more large-scale enterprise solutioning. Being at a startup in those types of places offers some really interesting challenges, lots of hats and lots of hustle. And enterprise work is significantly different from that. So I have really been focusing the last couple of years on trying to get into the realm of mass, very, very large organizations and helping them to move into appropriate architecture and engineering maturity. And that's where I've really been focusing and putting all of my efforts, and trying to help a lot with cloud-based solutioning and what that means and what cloud native means and all that kind of stuff. And so, that's my journey in a nutshell really quickly from age 6 to a little bit older.
Nice, awesome. So you mentioned cloud-based technologies. Obviously, that's part of what our conference is about. And earlier, you and I have been chatting about certifications and Amazon and other cloud environments. I was kind of curious, over the years, there's been a lot of different opinions in the industry about certifications and whether or not they stand for a whole lot or what they mean. And, you and I both have multiple AWS certifications. Well, you have many, I have one. We have friends with certs in all the cloud platforms. And I personally felt like at least the Amazon cert I took was really hard. There was a lot of stuff you had to know. I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on any platform as Azure, GCP, AWS, the whole certification process. Do you think that brings any value to the table, or do you think it's just noise?
I think that it absolutely brings value to the table. What value is I believe the argument to be presented. A large factor is that, I can give you the example here. When I started at WGU, there was nobody certified, and we were kind of coming in with a all-in AWS movement, but the reality was is we weren't even having the same conversations when we talked about, Docker, or you talk about, back then ECS before Fargate was out, or things like that. We had the problem that just the vocabulary was a bit of an issue. And so I adopted the idea that certification not only got us all on the same page, but got us to being able to speak the same language about the same solutions. And so I think that inherently a certification doesn't necessarily equal an expert or even somebody who understands and knows the platforms. However, it gives you the basis for good engineering to understand the vocabulary, having the same conversations, and giving an insight into what it is that they should be moving towards or understanding or learning. And so, I took this organization from having 0 certified engineers to over 100 certified engineers. And what that did for us wasn't necessarily make everybody an AWS expert, but it made everybody, from early evangelists of some of the top technologists that I prodded and helped along to get those certifications, to everybody being excited about the technology. And once you have an engineer or a technologist who's excited about the solutions and the technology that they're using, you get exponentially better results. And so from that perception, we were able to drive a really successful migration. We've moved over 3,000 VMs, multiple applications, and it wasn't just lift and shift because we didn't understand the cloud, but everybody had that base understanding. And so I think that certifications give you that. It gives you vocabulary, it gives you knowledge, and it gives you interest. I would not, however, put up against a certification saying this will make you a expert. I find them more often, and I hold 5 AWS certifications from associate to pro. And as difficult as those are, it's really the hands-on work and the interest inside of the industry that really drives that knowledge. But the certifications are invaluable to get that jumping point.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think you're right on the vocabulary. I would also say that it's a really good opportunity to be exposed to all the different services, because it's very easy to understand a solution, moving that to an environment and use whatever you're used to, but you might not be aware of all the other cloud native services that are available, which, part of our event on the 11th is to kind of talk about that. Is, there's the way we may have built software before, and then in the cloud, you will probably build that a little differently. And I guess we'll talk about that in a minute when we get to your workshop.
Sure.
Actually, maybe that's like a good place for us to segue over. So I think you have the unique distinction of doing the most talks of anybody at our event. I appreciate that. I originally was going to be doing a lot of different talks and realized I can't really coordinate stuff and be always busy. So
I don't know if I'm honored or if I feel like a sucker. Somewhere in the middle, probably.
Yeah, no, for sure. You're definitely an honor. So we have 3 different talks you're going to talk about. One about undifferentiated work, which is a bit of a theme of our conference, which is work that everybody has to do. That makes it not differentiated. And you want to sort of reduce the amount of time you spend in those areas, because that's not helping you reach your customers. Another session you're doing is just management. I love this title. I'm just going to leave it at that. People should definitely check it out. It's got some good stuff. And then the one I wanted to talk about today is your workshop on the microservices kata. Yeah. So before we jump into the actual details, talk a little bit about the name kata, its relationship with lean, and I'll just prime you with that and go ahead.
Yeah, so very first out the gate, I need to give 100% credit and authority to this particular thing to Mark Richards from No Fluff Just Stuff. He was unwittingly my mentor and helper in creating this that I heavily adopted and has brought into my current organization. And a kata is, at its base form, comes from Kung Fu and different forms of martial arts, where you have a series of practices that you do, or forms that you go through to make sure that you build muscle memory and those types of things into your ability to work on an immediate reaction type of space. And so the idea around architecture of katas is that we don't get to practice architecture very often, right? The reality is you're not constantly reorganizing or rebuilding an entire platform, and you're not building from scratch greenfield every day. And so outside of those, the opportunities are pretty small, right? You're either redoing a microservice or you're adding a feature or functionality, and that's simply just not a heavy lift inside of architecture. And so what happens is you end up with a bifurcation of either ivory tower architects or engineers who are just doing their best, right? Who are lead. And so we try to bridge that gap to bring down from the ivory tower or mic drop type of architect who comes in and just says, hey, this is what we're doing, and go do it, and giving no actual understanding of the system, versus perhaps an engineer who's just not sure what ilities are. They're not sure what the ability to create components or services, or how those should be built, or entity models, etc. And so coming across the kata is the idea that you can practice architecture and keep your edge sharp, so to speak, and continue to move down those paths where when you do have to do architecture, it's not dust off the old books and see what you can come up with, but you're ready for that. And it bleeds into engineering maturity as a whole, really. So the more that you start to think about that, you'll get small features and you'll run through katas or small introductions into architecture every time you come across something, and the result ends up being significantly better code production and integrations, right? Is the biggest thing, and cross-functional dependencies is what really starts to shine in those things.
Cool, thank you. One of the things I'm a huge proponent of is for everybody on the team, especially the people that write code, that they can quickly stand up, say, an example microservice. Not a whole architecture, but just something small, because when, like you said, when you've got even a microservice with a focused function, it's still a bunch of things, whether it's OAuth or it's, you got some service mesh, you got all these other things happening. It's very hard to say, well, how should this one endpoint work? And I think having a kata where you're able to quickly spin up a microservice, try a little thing and say, okay, now I know how it works, put it into your bigger service, still small, but bigger. And then it doesn't work, okay, it's not what I just did because I've got a working example. I can go over here. And so I've always been a big proponent of people doing that. And so, I think those katas are great, whether they're at the low level or at the big level. I'm kind of excited to see what you're going to talk about. So with that, tell us a little bit about what people might expect when they go to the microservices kata.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is I want to stress that this is not a architect only or an engineer only example. So when we put these together here, we include cloud engineers, we include scrum masters and product owners. This is a whole product and team event because everybody is there, right? The very first thing that any engineer will tell you is with crappy requirements, produces crappy code. And so, when you're doing a kata, you really want the idea is to be as realistic as possible. And so what you'll expect is you'll come in and we will give you basically the fleshlings of this idea of a problem to solve, something to architect against. And we will give you a couple of requirements, a couple easy, a couple not, and a couple of things to negotiate against. And we'll take a couple of minutes together to define ilities. And ilities are things like scalability, manageability, feasibility, the things that you can pivot off of that really drive you towards, hey, what is the architectural pattern that we should be using and what does that look like? And then that drives into component building. And so what we'll do is we'll sit down together. I'll present a series or a couple of problems that we'll decide around as a group. And then we'll break into teams of 5 to 10, depending on the attendance. And you'll sit down as groups and basically I myself and maybe one or two other key people who we pick out of the audience will be servicing as moderators. And you're going to go and you're going to actually put together a architecture that the delivery will be your actual plan for how you get through this. In the period of time that we have, what I would expect out of that is a really high level understanding of what is the problem that you're solving, what do you expect to get as your outcome, and where do you start? What are the ilities, what are the capabilities that you're solving against and the feature sets, and what do your components look like? And so that's kind of what it's going to be. It's a lot of fun, to be honest. You get to work with people in a diverse environment. You get the opportunity to really open up to how other people solve problems, which I find is one of the greatest learning experiences that you can do, is getting just a diverse set of people saying, hey, that's not how we think about things at all. And in fact, if you know the story of AWS, that's exactly how they started, right? They had a bunch of extra stuff laying around and somebody was like, well, why don't we build a bunch of storage engines and call it S3? And so that's the type of thing that you get some diversity and thought process there. And you run through these architecture katas and your outcome will be a new way to look at a problem that you will have value in immediately. You will go back out of this conference from this one, 80, 90-minute session, and you'll have value to add immediately. That I can almost guarantee you'll be excited about going and telling the rest of your team what you did, and it'll be fantastic.
Awesome. And, I think just thinking about some of the other talks and a couple of the ones I'm going to be doing and you're doing earlier in the day, I think they feed nicely into this whole exercise because we're going to be talking about those cross-functional teams that include everybody, not just sort of a tech team or a separate operations silo, but really all the different people together as a team moving towards one objective. And your workshop will definitely be bringing those different people together. So you can kind of see what we're talking about in the morning and then go and hands-on actually do
Yep.
that as a group.
Absolutely.
And maybe it's with your fellow colleagues because we have a few companies coming with a bunch of people, but also we have, people just showing up at the event and they could work with people they don't know, which would also be really good to just help get, again, like you said, diverse perspectives on.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to additionally just quickly point out that one of the biggest things too that you get from this type of thought process in architecting first really feeds into the undifferentiated work that we're talking about. It gives you an opportunity at the very beginning to identify, are you solving a problem that you just shouldn't be solving, right? That should be out there that you can, that has the opportunity to just differentiate yourself, right? As opposed to being undifferentiated. And so when you architect things, it's not just how do we build it all by ourselves, right? You start to consider what is worth our time and how does that go into it. And so I completely agree with you. The feed in into this will be a fantastic opportunity for something a lot of fun and very interesting.
Awesome. Great. Okay, so we are almost out of time. Before we wrap up, though, each person we've talked to, we have a little Easter egg question. So I will turn it over to you. What's the question you would like people to ponder, and what you would want them to talk to you about if they see you at the event?
So I have a couple of tenets in my life, and my number one tenet that is always a very good discussion is never build good Band-Aids.
Nice.
If you watch all this and you come to me, come and ask me why you should never build good Band-Aids.
Okay, I love it. That sounds great. Well, thanks, Adam, so much for being here. Excited to see you in about 12 days or 11 days. And thanks. Have a great afternoon.
Absolutely. Thank you.